there you can see on your screens there the coffin of Queen Elizabeth II making its way inside St Giles Cathedral for a memorial service. Dignitaries inside the cathedral include Britain's current Prime Minister Liz Truss, as well as former Prime Minister Gordon Brown. Members of the public will be able to view the coffin from 5 p.m. local time, I believe, for a little under 24 hours. I'd like to bring in Judith Rowbotham in once again. Professor, after these 24 hours in Edinburgh, clearly we have the Queen's coffin, which will be flown to London, and then there, after a short time in Buckingham Palace, it will lie in state.
Yes, the time in Buckingham Palace is intended to give space for the members of the royal household who knew her, worked for her directly, to pay their respects. And then she will be taken to Westminster Hall for the second lying in state, because she will lie in state here in St Giles Cathedral for, as you said, just under 24 hours, 22 hours to be precise. And that will mean that in total the Queen has lain in state for people to pay their respects to her in public for 5 days, bar all but a few minutes. And I think we're about to hear the fanfare starting in a moment. So this is the start of an initial memorial service. And again, the dead silence, the respect implied. It's huge.
It was indeed just watching the. What do you think? Do you want to end it now and come? Because of course that main funeral service will be Monday in London, and we know the US President Joe Biden will be attending, and heads of state and possibly former US presidents, former heads of state from right around the world. A security nightmare, isn't it?
It is, and we have been hearing some extraordinary statements, for example, that visiting heads of state have been advised to use buses so that the traffic won't become too much of a nightmare in London. Needless to say, the enormous United States operation will not be doing that, and they have pointed out that they will need massive arrangements put in place for any time that Joe Biden or the US president moves. The beast, as the American motorcade is called, accompanies him, and that is not going to cope very well with London buses. So it is astonishing. There will be, of course, airport-style security for those people who wish to pay their respects before the funeral. It will be going overnight from Wednesday in London right through until Monday morning. And those people who wish to pay their respects before the funeral have been advised that they should not go if they don't feel able to stand up for a very long time, because the queue will be constantly moving and there will be nowhere to sit. They've put in place extra toilets. They madly underestimated the number of people who would want to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth II's mother in 2002 when she died. About 200,000 people turned up to pay their respects. It's expected that 10 times that number will wish to pay their respects coming up to the funeral in Westminster. So that itself will be very, very difficult. And there will be some airport-style security for people just wishing to pay their respects before the day of the funeral.
And considering of course, we're going to have the current US President, Joe Biden, but the security apparatus involved for former US presidents as well, because we could potentially have former President Barack Obama as well attending. We're not sure. No details given on that. Professor Rowbotham, clearly this very solemn ceremony is about to get underway at St Giles Cathedral. What are we expected in terms of remembrances in London? What can we expect to see there?
Well, I think we're already seeing how many people have continuously been laying flowers outside Buckingham Palace, which have then been moved down to Green Park and St James's. It is an absolute sea of flowers and sort of messages of respect, of tribute, and that is only going to continue and to grow. Speaking as somebody who's in London at the moment, not far from Kensington Palace, already I can see that it's virtually impossible for anybody to book a hotel room anywhere in London, certainly in central London. London is already potentially full because so many people wish to be there, to be part of this historic saying farewell and thank you to Her late Majesty. She really was somebody who people could and did relate to personally as well as institutionally as the symbol of the head of state. So I think that what we've seen in Edinburgh is going to be repeated and magnified in London.
Professor, what do you make of, former colonies? I'm thinking India, for instance, which clearly the government in power is trying to erase vestiges of the past, but in the same breath, yesterday held a day of mourning.
Because you cannot just eradicate the past. If you look at the Indian legal system, it is still absolutely rooted in the civil code and the criminal code that was given to the British Raj, which was never all of India, remember. There were also the princely states. And you cannot just eradicate the past without eradicating a huge amount of your own identity. So it's interesting that many of the Caribbean colonies who have or are debating not having the monarch as head of state are not suggesting, for example, that they leave the Commonwealth. And His Majesty Charles III is, after all, the head of the Commonwealth. So indirectly as well as directly, that heritage of links between former colonies, present colonies, realms beyond the seas are enduring, because history itself is enduring. So from that point of view, You can't wipe it out.
Angela?
I think that certainly Queen Elizabeth II, because she reigned for so long, met so many world leaders and acquired, inevitably, such wisdom and knowledge about world events. She commanded respect around the world. That can be separated from whether or not all of those countries wish in the future to remain part of the Commonwealth.
Absolutely.
Or to have her as head of state. And as I'm sure Professor Rowbotham knows, it's not automatic that the monarch of England is the head of the Commonwealth. And it was agreed that Charles would take over from Queen Elizabeth II. Largely, a lot of people said because they knew how valuable and how much she valued the Commonwealth and how much she loved the worldwide family, as she saw it, of the Commonwealth. And out of respect to her, it was more or less decided unanimously that Charles would automatically become head of the Commonwealth after her death. But that is not, under law, that is not an automatic rule. It might be that after Charles the rules change, and well, there are no rules that it should automatically be the British monarch. So
It may well do. It's a question, as you say, Angela, of consent. And don't forget that during his time as Prince of Wales, Charles was an ardent supporter of the Commonwealth. And that, I think, also influenced the decision to endorse his election as successor to Her Majesty after her death. So
because
things
Professor
change.
Rowbotham, I have an interesting quote from Queen Elizabeth II, actually from a visit to India in 1997. And there was some unhappiness that she was going to visit one very controversial site, and she did speak on the eve of that visit, and she said it is no secret that there have been some difficult periods, difficult episodes in the past, but history cannot be rewritten. However much we might sometimes wish otherwise, it has its moments of sadness as well as gladness. We must learn from the sadness and build on the gladness. So I think it's very interesting, those words which she said in 1997, given that today there is a movement to sort of erase and correct the wrongs of the past, essentially.
And there's a very lively debate on social media about many people saying, what is all this fuss? She was a queen at time of the empire. There was an awful lot of bloodshed associated with that. There are very many people for whom that is an extremely painful time. There are others who say that is the past, that is history, and the Queen herself was a symbol rather than anybody actively involved in anything. So, obviously there is a debate out there. I mean, even more close to home in Northern Ireland, where when the proclamation was read out in Northern Ireland over the weekend, the First Minister designate, Michelle O'Neill, who is of Sinn Féin, the Irish Nationalist Party, which favours United Ireland, said, we do not pledge allegiance to the monarchy, and so we will not be attending that ceremony. And she did not attend, whilst at the same time calling for respect and great respect for the Queen and expressing her condolences. The Queen did a massively important and very successful operation when she visited Dublin and did an awful lot to heal feelings towards the Crown in the Republic of Ireland. That isn't to say that everyone is happy or sad at the course of events, but she did a very good PR job while she was over, and it seemed a very sincere one too at the time.
I'd like to go close to Clovis Casali, who's standing by outside St Giles Cathedral. Clovis, as the Queen's coffin was making its way inside the cathedral, we saw the crowds there still standing in complete silence. Are they staying there while the service gets underway inside?
Those were very moving images. Crowds are still here. Some many actually have left. It doesn't mean that there aren't still thousands of people here on the royal mile. you might be able to hear behind you the religious service taking place inside St Giles Cathedral, just where I'm standing. Well,
Yeah,
you can hear
Clovis, we're
from
going
the
to have to interrupt
outside.
you there. The quality of your audio is not very clear. We're going to re-establish the line with Clovis. Angela, clearly the crowd's still gathering. You saw those images on your screen. Scots paying their final respects in a very solemn manner for Queen Elizabeth II.
Yes, she has very solid Scottish ancestry, Queen Elizabeth II. The British monarchy does. And so there is not a sense in Scotland that she is an imported monarch. She, on her mother's side, goes way back in her Scottish lineage. And so I think that probably contributes to the fact that she's mostly well-liked in Scotland as well.
Professor Rowbotham, this is one of the many religious ceremonies which we're going to see here in the course of this period of mourning across the United Kingdom. How religious is the royal family?
Queen herself was a deeply devout woman who made it plain throughout her life that she looked to her faith to sustain her, both in her personal and her public life. Prince Charles has also made it clear that he himself is a profoundly devout man. He values the Anglican communion, but also values other faiths. He has indeed said in the past that he doesn't wish to be that old title that was awarded to Henry VIII, defender of the faith, but defender of faiths. So that in itself tells you a great deal. The thing about the royal family is that they may privately differ in precisely the forms of religion that they value, but they are undoubtedly a deeply Christian family. But as part of that, well, my grandfather was a clergyman, and he once said to me, because I am a Christian, I am a Buddhist, I am a Hindu, and that in itself was very much the kind of attitude that you will find in the royal family, that their Christian faith means that all other faiths are also of value to them.
Angela?
Yeah, Professor Rowbotham was referring there to when now King Charles III, at the time the Prince of Wales, said he might like to be known as defender of faiths rather than defender of the faith, which is the official role of the monarch. That was quickly corrected by his office because it caused quite a bit of consternation. The British monarch is head of the Church of England, and it would have been a very complicated unilateral move. And so that was quickly corrected. But the sentiment behind it is that he is a man who has always been very interested in other faiths and interfaith dialogues. Yeah.
And to be